I think that, as an adult watching a childhood movie, you can react in one of two ways. First, you feel bored by the simplicity and surprised you ever enjoyed it. Or two, you feel taken aback by the wonderful complexity you missed, and able to enjoy the film in a completely new way. When I recently rewatched The Wizard of Oz and Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, my reaction appeared definitely the latter. However, going beyond entertainment, I felt struck by the enormous aesthetic and thematic similarities between the two films. While many coming-of-age films transition the protagonist from a childish environment to one of harsh reality, these two films do the opposite. In Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory and The Wizard of Oz, exaggerated mise-en-scène creates a world of fantasy and imagination, in which the adult characters' inherent weaknesses are clearly exposed. The first song in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory is the classic Candyman, perhaps the most notable song in the movie, yet it hints to the archetype of a man rather than a specific character. The Candyman is the idealized version of an adult, as told from a child's perspective, who provides candy and makes the world taste good. Candyman can also be read with a darker connotation, as connected with slang referring to drug dealer. This reading connects with the theme of addiction and consumption present throughout the film, in which case the adults are the Candymen who enable these activities. This concept of an adult put on a false pedestal by children is reminiscent of the wizard in The Wizard of Oz, who, like the Candyman, is nothing more than a shell of a man with empty promises. The realization that the wizard is just a simple man behind a curtain is the most obvious example of flawed adulthood throughout the film, and reinforces how coming of age means shattering the image of adults as superhero figures.
I'm fed up with cabbage water.
Both Charlie and Dorothy are defined by their restraints, financially and emotionally. This much is immediately clear from both the dismal setting of their homes, as well as their constant reach for something greater. They are introduced in extremely humble settings, self-consciously clashing with later images of luxury and beauty present in both films. In Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, this contrast is shown through the ramshackle house he lives in, as well as his family's incredulity when he brings back a loaf of bread. The Wizard of Oz goes beyond set design to demonstrate a sense of hopelessness, using sepia tones to highlight lack of joy and passion in Dorothy's life. Far from being contempt, both characters dream of changing their situation. Charlie looks on with sadness at the children enjoying life from within the candy shop, and becomes obsessed with finding the golden ticket as a path out of depressing poverty. Dorothy, meanwhile, wanders the field with Toto, and famously sings of a place where the skies are bluer and troubles melt like lemon drops. In both cases, these restraints are created by the weaknesses and flaws of adults, however good their intentions. The starkness and obvious poverty of Charlie's living situation not only underlines the contrast between consumption and depravity, very common in the film, but shows the helplessness of his family. His 4 bedridden grandparents who do nothing but use the money Charlie makes from paper routes. They are shown as well-meaning, but still obviously a limitation in his life. Even his mother, who tells him to cheer up, is unable to realistically increase his happiness or opportunities. Dorothy's family seems to also have positive intentions, but they are clearly unable to give her the emotional attention she deserves. She is constantly behaving as nothing but a nuisance, interfering with daily life at the farm, and when she tries to talk with men working on the wagons, as well as her own aunt and uncle, they spurn her and try to get back to their jobs. In addition, Dorothy's aunt and uncle are unable to stop Toto from being kidnapped by Byra Dolch, or even protect Dorothy from the Twister. Overall, they do nothing to assist Dorothy at any point in the film. The method in which characters enter the hyperreal world, in which most of the movie takes place, is very similar to one another. Dorothy enters her house, which is filled with right angles, squares, rectangles, windows, and doors, but the first sight of the foreign world is a shapeless twister that swirls inexplicable objects in front of Dorothy's window. And once she has arrived, there are nothing but non-prismatic shapes proving that she is now in an alternate reality. As is with Charlie, the red carpet leading up to the factory is completely straight with no curves. The doors are square and regular, and even the first image once inside the factory is a straight frame which they cross. Once they are in, there are nothing but curves, strange sights, irregular texts and surfaces, and seemingly random patterns scattered throughout. The magical Candyland is completely unpredictable, and there are no signs of order or restraint. Salman Rushdie pays attention to these details when he writes, "To the left of the screen is a tree trunk, a vertical line echoing the telegraph poles of the scene before. Hanging from an approximately horizontal branch are a triangle and a circle. In mid-shot are further geometric elements." His analysis takes a purely objective approach in order to identify what figures are deliberately placed in the scene to create the geometrically sound environment that's called Kansas. Once Dorothy is departing Kansas, Rushdie identifies the contrasting visuals that are found in each shot by saying, "The tornado is just an untrustworthy, sinuous, shifting shape, random and unfixed. Look at the beginning of the yellow brick road. It's a perfect spiral. Look at Glinda's carriage, that perfect, luminous sphere. Observe the Wicked Witch of the West, her bent figure, her misshapen hat. How does she depart? In a puff of shapeless smoke." Rushdie confidently shows how the opposition between the geometric and the twisty is extremely blatant within the film, with several examples that support the overall argument. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory also plays with this contrast between shapes, emphasizing the round and bulbous shapes within the fantastical world of the factory, as well as its overweight characters, with the gray, geometric townhouses and iron gates outside. The battle between innocence and adulthood is highlighted by Rushdie when he references Dorothy by saying, "She demands justice for her little dog, while the adults give in meekly to the powerful Miss Gulch. Dorothy is the life force of this Kansas, just as Miss Gulch is the force of death. Perhaps it is Dorothy's turmoil, the cyclone of fleeing unleashed by the conflict between Dorothy and Miss Gulch. Miss Gulch's character is specifically designed to represent a completely unforgiving, cruel individual which has completely forgotten the meaning of being a child, while Dorothy embraces forgiveness and innocence, which is projected into her only known friend, Toto. The failure of her aunt and uncle to protect her individuality becomes a clash between Miss Gulch and her. Thus, the tornado that occurs soon after can be directly attributed to this conflict. It is clear that the terrible character traits demonstrated by each of the children who win the golden tickets, with the exception of Charlie, are both triggered and enabled by poor parenting. Augustus Gloop is mirrored by his mother, who never criticizes his lifestyle but only urges him to save some for later. Meanwhile, Veruca's ridiculous brattiness is irritating to the viewer from her first appearance, and it is obvious that her parents only seek to satisfy her crazy demands, never imposing any kind of boundaries or discipline for the sake of her supposed happiness. Violet is obsessed with gum, and demonstrates the same belligerent attitude and lack of respect towards her unflinching parents, who never protest her habits of constantly chewing and spitting. Mother. The situation of flawed parenting is echoed with Mike TV, who never tears his eyes from the screen and is only encouraged by his mother, who brings him dinner so he doesn't have to stop watching. The mob-like craze surrounding the golden ticket contest is broadcasted during the film, emphasizing that all adults are just like children, senselessly and selfishly grabbing at candy bars and unable to rise above greed or vanity, which traps them. Adults are shown without priorities or common sense, completely overturning our idea of everything mature adults should be. Willy Wonka emerging on the red carpet is reminiscent of Gilda coming down the yellow brick road. Both characters take a clear side in condemning so-called evil, however they both allow things to happen more than enabling things to happen. For example, Glinda gives Dorothy the slippers but has her do all the work, while Wonka would rather watch the children ruin themselves than directly discipline them. Wonka's character in particular is very questionable. He is clearly against the concept of greed, gluttony, and overall lack of values present in the three children, yet he is responsible for feeding into their insatiable thirst by owning and operating the chocolate factory itself, which is the main symbol for overconsumption throughout the film. Though each of the children are punished in their own way for their sins, it is more of an inevitable result of their own decisions than any decisive action on Wonka's part. In this way, it is impossible to classify Wonka as a figure of respected authority, as his sarcastic and ironic demeanor signal that he would rather entertain himself than impart wisdom on the children. Both Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory and The Wizard of Oz use fantastical set design and color to underline the inherent flaws of adult characters. And in doing this, demonstrate how coming of age means accepting these imperfections and taking responsibility for your own life.